Listen to this podcast, or I'll gut you.
Welcome back, Horror Hounds, to Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show podcast.
I'm Mike Ghostman Pickle.
And I'm James Rivera. Today we're going to talk about a couple of new releases, Saint Maude and SYNCHRONIC. And we're going to play a round of Tubi Roulette at the end of this all. But before we get to that, we have to get to
Horror Show News.
All right, our first story is Jordan Peele's Twilight Zone reboot is canceled at CBS.
Jeepers Creepers Reborn is already finished shooting and ready to go.
The Exorcist is coming, of course, but William Friedkin wants you to know that he has nothing to do with it.
The lost George A. Romero film, The Amusement Park, will be shown by Shudder this summer.
Alexander Aja's Oxygen is coming to Netflix.
The Collected Stills are finally released. That's for Marcus Dunstan's The Collector trilogy.
Director Zack Snyder returns to the zombie subgenre with Army of the Dead coming to Netflix.
A new Pet Sematary film is being developed for Paramount Plus.
The new Paranormal Activity film will be also a Paramount Plus exclusive.
And lastly, Spike Lee tackles Lovecraft with The Realm of Cthulhu for Netflix.
Our first one is Jordan Peele's Twilight Zone reboot canceled at CBS. The reboot of Twilight Zone has been canceled at CBS Plus after only 2 seasons. It would have been on the newly branded Paramount Plus instead of CBS Plus, but producers Jordan Peele and Simon Kinberg actually decided to walk away. Paramount actually wanted a new season. They also have the original available on the streaming service, so they wanted to continue the new one, but I was surprised by this. I thought CBS canceled it, but no, Jordan Peele and Simon Kinberg walked away.
Well, I'll say this. I'm glad that they walked away because Jordan Peele has so much on the horizon. I want him working on original content. As it was, I didn't see the second season of The Twilight Zone, but the first season for me was a mixed batch. It went in between episodes that I thought were really wonderful and then some that I just thought were kind of flat out stupid, if I'm being perfectly honest. I haven't checked out the second season. Jordan Peele is going to be working on a new movie soon. I know that. I mean, I think he's going to be working at collaborating with Daniel Kaluuya again, but we have no information on that project, so we're not reporting that as news. And he just wrote the Candyman film that's going to be coming out later this year. He's producing so many things. He's producing Lovecraft Country, so, I mean, one can only take on so many projects before they become creatively overwhelmed, so I'm okay with this.
Yeah, and I just think he just didn't have the time to put the amount of work and effort into it that he needed to.
And not with the career that he has going right now anyway.
Yeah, because I think it could have been really good if he'd had a lot more input in it. And it just wasn't happening. I mean, I hadn't checked out a whole lot of it, but what I seen of it, I wasn't completely blown away.
Yeah. I mean, nothing's ever going to compare to the original one. So this is one that I would say no big loss to me. I think we're going to be okay. We have the classic Twilight Zones. You can check out these new seasons, and I'm sure we're going to get some wonderful new stuff from Peele in the future.
So are they done with it, or you think they'll take it to another network? Well, I assume Paramount must own it.
I think they're going to be done with it because it never made that big of a splash in the first place. The most splash it made was when its first season came out. I hardly heard anything about it during the second season. And what the excitement was that it was going to be Jordan Peele working on the Twilight Zone because nobody wanted to see the Twilight Zone revived like that. He was the appeal, so I don't even see this being going forward like that anymore. I think it's done.
You have to get just the right people involved because that old original TV series, you can still put it on to this day, and within 2 minutes of watching one episode, you see the how great it was.
Yeah, but it wasn't meant to be. What is meant to be, though, is Jeepers Creepers Reborn. It was announced that the Jeepers Creepers film entitled Jeepers Creepers Reborn has already been shot and it's already done, and it's going to be released sometime this year. The movie was picked up by Screen Media, who previously released Jeepers Creepers 3. Victor Salva will not be involved with the horror franchise, thank God. I'm so happy that he's not going to be a part of it. Victor Salva, as for those who don't know, is the creator of the original Jeepers Creepers film. It has been turned out that he is a pedophile and was an active pedophile while he was making the films. I don't think we need to see any more work from that man. I think he should be completely ran out of Hollywood. So I mixed feelings on this. I don't know if we really needed another Jeepers Creepers film with or without Victor Salva, to be quite honest. But we're going to get it anyway, and it's better that we don't have him with it. This is the synopsis. The film unfolds as the Horror Hound Festival holds its first event ever in Louisiana, where it attracts hundreds of geeks, freaks, and diehard horror fans from far and wide. Sounds like fun. Among them is fanboy Chase and his girlfriend Lane, who is forced to come along for the ride, but as the event approaches, Lane begins to experience unexplained premonitions and disturbing visions associated with the town's past, and in particular, local legend and urban myth, the Creeper. As the festival arrives and the blood-soaked entertainment builds to a frenzy, Lane believes that something unearthly has been summoned, and that she is at the center of it. I'm really kind of indifferent to this news. I do like the original Jeepers Creepers. I saw it so many times years before I realized who Victor Salva was. I thought the second one is dreadful. I know it has fans. The third one, I made it maybe through 10 or 15 minutes of it. I'm not convinced that this is a franchise that has legs like that. I think it was a one-and-done deal. I think the first one is effective. I don't really see any reason to continue for rehashing this unless you're just trying to come up with new money or something. Make a new horror icon. That's what I think.
I like the first Jeepers Creepers, and I even kind of liked the second one, not as good as the first one, but I kind of liked it. But then once I found out about Victor Salva, I just didn't. I mean, one was good, but it wasn't that good enough to revisit it, knowing what's behind it. You know, the creative voice behind it, and that it has to do with a predator of children. You know, that's part of the story. It just rubs me the wrong way. So that's why I wasn't interested in watching 3 at all. And then I heard it was crap anyway. So I'm excited about this one just because the first one was good, and I don't have any desire to go back and watch it. So give me another one that I feel comfortable watching. Okay, as long as Victor Salva's not involved.
I don't know. I mean, I'll definitely check it out as a horror fan, but I'm not really holding my breath that the new Jeepers Creepers Reborn is going to be the latest horror masterpiece. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I am wrong. And to their credit, they're giving to a new coming filmmaker, Timo Voronsola. Sorry if I butchered the name. Yeah.
And we'll let you know all about it when it comes out.
Yeah. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
The next one is more news on the new Exorcist reboot. We reported on it a couple weeks ago. We're kind of indifferent on whether it's going to be good or not. Just needs to have practical effects, that's all I have to say. But so apparently there was a rumor on IMDb about William Friedkin being involved. So here's what the director said on Twitter. There's a rumor on IMDb that I'm involved with a new version of The Exorcist. This isn't a rumor, it's a flat-out lie. That there's not enough money or motivation in the world to get me to do this. So
sounds like William Friedkin. Here's my thing, every Exorcist sequel has sucked aside from the third one. And the only reason that the third one is the golden exception why they were able to make actually quite a fantastic film out of that is because it wasn't a retread of the original Exorcist. Every other sequel is just replaying the same scenario of the original Exorcist. Sure, the story is slightly different. The details are a little bit different. There's changes here and there, but it is essentially, at its core, the same thing. I don't know if we need it. And I'm sorry, and I hate to be sounding cynical on this podcast, but fucking come on. Another Jeepers Creepers, another Exorcist, another this, another that. I'm like, give me an original story. I don't need to see The Exorcist rehashed again. If you're going to do a possession film, do original one. Think of Loose. That was a possession film that did nothing to imitate The Exorcist at all. completely removed itself. That it's bare, like, even though it's definitely a possession film, there's nothing comparable in it that you could say, oh, look, an Exorcist descendant. So if you're going to do a possession film, do something original like that. I think I'm tired of seeing the priest show up and exorcise the little girl, and the demon comes out, and then good triumphs over evil. It's become such a formula, and the Exorcist movies, my God, some of them are just really abysmal. There's the Dominion, there's different versions of the prequel, there's the Exorcist 2, the Heretic, and really the only one that's good to me is the third one, because it broke formula and made something wholly new out of that mythology.
And even Exorcist, the TV show, that they came up with a good idea to go with a sequel to the original film, and showed Reagan in her adult years. And even that fizzled out in the second season. It's like they ran out of ideas in the first season, which I thought was really good. And then just the second one fizzled out. And it just seems like they don't know what to do with the concept.
It's because they don't really think about what to do with the concept is the problem. They just see it's The Exorcist, it's a known brand, it's going to generate interest on its name recognition alone. So I don't even think they're even thinking that far. It's like, how are we going to make this make sense? I think that's the problem with it. Like, let's just make some money off The Exorcist brand and we'll handle it as it comes along. There was never really any plan to make a fully fleshed out Exorcist series. There was only plans for dollars.
Yeah.
So sorry for my skepticism. On the other hand, I have some news that I am actually excited for, so to break my little cynical streak. There's a lost George A. Romero film that we actually reported on this movie, The Amusement Park. It's going to be shown by Shudder this summer. We actually reported on this back in 2018, I believe. We talked about George Romero's film, The Amusement Park, which is a made-for-television film that's going to be 1 hour long. Never got a release, and it's finally going to be getting its release this summer. So we've been hearing about this for a couple years. Shudder announced that it has acquired the rights to the amusement park, and it's going to present a copy that's restored in 4K this summer. So a brand spanking new George A. Romero movie. Brand new, but old at the same time. This is what they had to say. The moment we heard the amusement park had been rediscovered and was being restored, we knew that we had to bring this unseen George A. Romero masterpiece to Shudder members, said Craig Engler, Shudder's general manager. We're beyond thrilled to work with Yellow Veil Pictures, who produced The Wonderful Loose, Suzanne and George A. Romero Foundation to give this important film the wide release it deserves. This film was completed in 1975. It follows Lincoln Mazel from Martin Mazel. He's an elderly man growing up increasingly disoriented and detached from reality as his troubles with growing old in the United States take shape around him in the form of roller coasters and chaotic crowds. So basically, like most of George A. Romero's horror films, this is going to be a film with a very deep social message buried within it. And the idea of it is this is going to be a horror movie about ageism and how society treats and discards the elderly. And we've already seen George Romero tackle consumerism, tackle civil rights, tackle all kinds of different political issues. It only makes sense that he tackled ageism and we never got to see it. I, for one, am excited. It's something special to see a new George A. Romero film from the height of his career, from when he was on fire. So this is not like a George A. Romero film towards the end. This should be prime George A. Romero from a time when his career was at its best. So I'm particularly excited for this. It's rare that we ever get a treat like this these days, some kind of lost, rediscovered film from decades ago.
Yeah, I cannot wait. I miss George Romero so much because I'm one of the few that stuck with him through his whole career. I think every zombie film he made was really good, and even outside of the zombie genre, I love all of his stuff. I don't think I've ever seen a bad George Romero film at all. So the fact that he's been dead this long and we get to see work from him that we haven't seen before is such a treat for me. I just can't wait to see it.
Thank you, Shudder. And believe me, we'll be reporting on that as soon as it drops. It'll be a big discussion here.
We'll be talking all about that.
Yep.
More George Romero. Can't wait. And I also can't wait for more Alexander Aja. He's another director I'm a big fan of. Not quite as big a fan of George Romero. Let's not get carried away. But this guy's really good. His movie Oxygen is coming to Netflix. When Aja first read the script, he thought, This sounds like Buried with a 28 Days Later twist. Sounds interesting. Here's a synopsis. A young woman, played by Melanie Laurent from Inglourious Bastards, love her, wakes up in the middle of a cryogenic unit. She doesn't remember who she is or how she ended up sequestered in a box no longer than a coffin. As she's running out of oxygen, she must rebuild her memory to find a way out of her nightmare. The film was shot in French. Netflix has not announced the release date yet, but this sounds really good.
I mean, I dig Alexander Aja. He usually he delivers the goods. That's the best way I could describe Alexander Aja. Is like sometimes his concepts may not be the most original concepts for a movie, but he milks the shit out of whatever he's doing. He makes sure that even if it's like a scenario that you've seen before, what he's going to do is he's going to take that scenario, refine it, and build the maximum amount of suspense and tension that you could possibly wring out whatever the premise of his film is. So I'm looking forward to it, whatever it is. It's like, weird thing, I don't think he's a terribly original filmmaker, but I think he is an extremely effective one, and I think that's more important than originality.
Well, like I said, I've always been a big fan of his from the beginning, but it seems like one thing about Alexander Aja, it seems like the bigger he goes in concept and in scope of his work, the bigger he goes, the less effective it is. So it seems that he's a better filmmaker stripped down to his basest elements. And I think that's perfect for a concept like this.
I don't know. Are you referring negatively to Crawl?
Crawl, yeah, and Horns.
I know a noted cinephile who would disagree with you, Mr. Quentin Tarantino himself, who says that is one of the best films of the year of himself. So he might take issue with he's a better filmmaker when he's stripped down. So,
yeah. And look at Horns. Look how good Horns was. But it seems like the wider he went in scope, it just lost its magic toward the end.
I mean, my two favorite things of him, one is a remake, which is interesting to me because like I said, he's not the most original filmmaker, but like for what it's worth, I actually prefer his version of The Hills Have Eyes to Wes Craven's version of The Hills Have Eyes. And I'm not the type of person who typically prefers remakes to the original. And I don't like blasphemy against the great filmmakers like John Carpenter, Wes Craven, George Romero, the greats of the genre. But it has to be said that maybe Wes Craven's had the original vision, but I feel like that was more suited for Alexander Aja's style, and I think he did a better version. And, of course, he did High Tension, the French one, which I love. Brutal, nasty, effective, vicious little twist. I know everybody's not a fan of that movie, and I could see why it's definitely a turnoff to some people, but I'm a big fan of High Tension.
Me too. And he did with Hills Have Eyes what most studios and producers wish a filmmaker would do with a remake, which is take the spirit of the original and make the best use of the updated technology and do something truly brutal.
Yeah. That Hills Have Eyes remake was definitely a standout horror film, especially the extreme horror of that era.
I'm looking forward to Oxygen. Looks like Netflix wants to stay relevant with horror because they've been kind of scant lately.
Yes, they have. They have. So the next bit of news is something that I think is going to excite Michael. We've been reporting on The Collected for a while. That is the third film in the Collector trilogy by Marcus Dunstan and co-writer Patrick Melton. There's not much new news about this movie. However, there were some stills that were leaked today. I mean, by the time you hear this podcast, it'll be a couple days. But there's new stills been released, and it looks like a prison attack is going to happen in this movie. So it looks like the Collector will be going to a prison and slashing people up. Tom Atkins is in this movie. We were told that all he's got when he faces the Collector is his mouth. And in typical Tom Atkins fashion, we can expect that his words will hit like this. That's from Bloody Disgusting, the quote they got from Bloody Disgusting. We've been reporting on this for a while, I think.
Yeah.
So there's not much new news about it, but we do have some. Did you get a chance to see the stills, Michael?
Yes, they look typical of the Collector fashion, like kind of freaky. And what I love about the Collector as a killer, he's kind of freaky and it's kind of unpredictable, and it seems to be more of that for the third one.
Seems like it's going to be really big scale for a slasher movie too.
Yeah, like you don't know what this killer is going to come up with
I
next.
mean, he's slashing up a police department. That's pretty
Yeah.
horrible. So it seems like he's going to Terminator levels now, just going up, and I'm curious to see how that's going to go. Is it going to compete?
You see it in part 2, he just keeps elevating his attacks. So it looks like he's going to elevate it even further, just go in the middle of a police station and start killing people.
Mhm. So we're in for the most epic of the Collector franchise.
Yeah, because we've been reporting on that since it was just a pipe dream, since it was just maybe going to happen one day.
So, for anybody who's interested in checking out the pictures, go to bloodydisgusting.com. They had an exclusive on it. There's plenty of cool pictures for you to look at, and it looks like this is going to be a very exciting slasher film, a big scale slasher film. And it's always nice to see Tom Atkins show up in anything.
Yeah, the excitement builds with everything I find out about this movie. And Tom Atkins is involved. He's a badass, and he'll make anything good.
I think he'll fit right into this world. I can definitely see
Yeah.
Tom Atkins slipping in there very easily. Hopefully it comes out soon. I mean, I didn't really see too much on the release date, but hopefully they get it out pretty soon.
Well, we have stills, so we know it's in the bag. So
Yeah.
it's just a matter of time now. It's no longer a pipe dream. It's finally going to happen.
Yep.
Also, another thing that's happening is director Zack Snyder is returning to the zombie subgenre with Army of the Dead coming to Netflix, a mean action zombie thriller. It's been 17 years since he did the Dawn of the Dead remake, which James and I aren't that fond of.
Shut up. That movie is 17 years old.
Yeah.
That movie came out 17 years ago, Michael.
Yeah. People seem to be on that movie's nuts.
Crap.
We are not.
Um,
So, Army of the Dead stars Dave Bautista, and the synopsis is: following a zombie outbreak in Las Vegas, a group of mercenaries take the ultimate gamble, pun intended, venturing into the quarantine zone to pull off the greatest heist ever attempted. It's rated R for strong bloody violence and graphic nudity. It premieres on Netflix May 21st. And after that, there will also be an Army of the Dead prequel and an animated series prequel.
they're really banking on it being a success if they already have the franchise plotted out like that.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I said, the trailer looks really good. Looks very high energy. It looks intense, but it also looks like very saturated CGI. So let's just hope that doesn't kill it. If that doesn't kill it, they have a good star. Dave Bautista is good. The action looks good. And the CGI actually does look good, but it still looks like there's a lot of it. So let's hope that doesn't kill it.
Will my horror credentials get revoked if I admit I'm actually more interested in seeing the Snyder cut of Justice League than I am seeing him tackle a new zombie film? I'm not trying to be any, I don't know. The trailer looks good and all, but I mean, The Dawn of the Dead is a movie that I understand why people like it, and I get why it's a big thing and why it's such a beloved remake. I just don't connect with it at all, and it's a film that on the surface looks good, and I see what's exciting about it, and the opening sequence of the Dawn of the Dead remake is fantastic. I like everything with the opening sequence and the credits, and it led me to think that we're going to get into a better film than it actually ended up being. But just because it's high octane and there's a lot of blood and violence and nudity does not mean that I'm going to end up liking this movie. So I mean, we'll see. I'm kind of iffy on Zack Snyder. I enjoy Watchmen, his adaptation of Watchmen. I'm not crazy about 300. I like Man of Steel. Batman versus Superman, I'm kind of somewhere in the middle on that one. I've never seen Sucker Punch, and I've never been crazy about Dawn of the Dead. So I get why people love Zack Snyder. He's definitely a gifted filmmaker. He has a really spectacular sense of visuals and things that just pop off the screen. But his stuff doesn't connect with me. A lot of it is just pops in a way that's too surface level for my taste. It seems like a lot of his films tease at deeper ideas that they never really explore and go into depth to. It's just glossing over big themes. It's just, I don't know. It's hard for me to get excited for another zombie film from Zack Snyder.
But I admit I liked more of his stuff than I've disliked. But it's just he never dials back from that cartoonish look. Like the more technology advances, he tries to go beyond it. You know what I mean?
That's what his fans like about him, though.
Yeah.
I think that's what, like, it's one of those things where I feel like Zack Snyder is one of those, like, filmmaking artists is either his work really works for you or it really doesn't work for you. Like, I think the man's talented. I have a great amount of respect for what he does, and I could definitely see why he has his fans, but I have a hard time connecting to the films that he makes for the most part. And I think the only one that I cared for, like, really, really liked was Watchmen, and that was already because it's based on a text that's basically storyboarding the entire movie for you. A lot of the depth of that film and the beautiful imagery is stuff that already pre-existed in comic book panels already. He just had to visualize it perfectly. And even then, I think he ruined the ending of that. That's a whole other thing, but it's just, I have a hard time connecting with what he's going for in his movies.
Well, I have one question in Army of the Dead. If this is a world that's so ravaged by zombies that you have thousands upon thousands of zombies on top of each other in Vegas, what could possibly be in Vegas that's valuable enough in this type of world to go in there in the middle of all these thousands of zombies and try to get it? What could possibly be valuable enough?
Maybe when the mob started Vegas, they left money in a vault. Or I don't know.
How could a lot of money be valuable in a world that's ravaged by zombies, though?
Oh, you know, I'm sure millionaire capitalists will still find a way to try to thrive in the middle of that. So I guess it's believable, but yeah.
Let's hope they address that. Let's hope it's something that's in Vegas that could save the human race or something like that. Hopefully it's not money.
And hey, if I eat my words on this film, I would gladly eat my words. I like being proven wrong when I'm skeptical of a film. So hey, if I like it, I'll admit I was 100% wrong about it.
Oh yeah, I want an awesome Zack Snyder zombie movie. I want it. Let's hope we get it.
We get it. So, a new Pet Sematary film is being developed for Paramount Plus. The Paramount Plus streaming service will be getting a huge boost of exclusive horror content. Now is the new Paranormal Activity movie is going to be debuting there, and a new installment of the Pet Sematary franchise, and this is going to be an origin story. I don't really know. I don't know. just flat out, just stop already. Stop with the Pet Sematary. It's done. You made the ones that you made in the late 80s and the 90s, and that's it. The remake was dreadful. I really hated the remake. Thank you, Will Walker, for re-editing it. For the fan edit by Will Walker, look it up. It's 20 million times better than the version that was released into theaters. I just don't care at all. And here's another thing. I've seen Paramount Plus's lineup. They have not a single original thing that they're announcing. It's all sequels. It's all prequels. It's all the extensions of a franchise. That's all they have on Paramount Plus. And this is what filmmaking is going to be coming down to. IP properties and fucking studio heads trying to figure out what's going to make money and what's going to make popular. This Paramount Plus app sounds like trash. I'm going to be completely honest with you. Like, it's going to be an algorithm of nothing but IP content, and it just seems so stupid and mindless and corporate. Big pass, big pass. You are just milking a franchise that does not need to be milked. There is no origin story for Pet Sematary because Stephen King didn't write one. Just stop it already. Like, no one wants to see this shit anymore. Sorry, I'm angry. I just don't care.
That is no way to compete in such a saturated streaming market, dude.
Yeah, a bunch of IP franchises and sequels and rehashes of everything you've already seen. God, shoot me now.
Throw some remakes and reboots in there as cash grabs, but come on, give us some more original content and enough streaming services, dude. Let's put a cap on that sometime.
Yeah.
And you know what? This shows me that there's no money to be made in making movies and selling them to streaming services. Because if all these companies feel that they need to start their own streaming service to make any money from movies, there's no money in it for us.
Not only
Let's
that,
start our own streaming service, horror show streaming service to make any money.
not only
James.
that, it's gonna fall under because nobody wants to, like. Is every channel gonna have a streaming service? We're gonna have 200. Like, dude, people really gonna pay for just to stream the Travel Channel, just to stream Paramount Plus? I'm like, dude, the way that there's so many apps out there, and the way that HBO Plus is capitalized on stuff, the way that Disney Plus has made its splash, and Amazon Prime and Netflix. We already got Hulu and shit. The thought of like you have to buy a subscription to everything to see movies. People are going to see less of this shit now. I guarantee you this is not going to work out the way they were. Nobody wants to own the Paramount Plus app and the CBS All Access app and here at All Access app. Oh, none of that, dude. Like, just stop it with it already. Like, this stuff is getting old. It's getting irritating. Like, oh, God. This news just bears no excitement for me at all whatsoever in any way, shape, or form.
When I first heard of CBS All Access, I was like, there's one show that I even watch on CBS, and then in any other show that they have that's even worth watching, they cancel within a season or two. Like, why would you open up a whole streaming service? And then it didn't work, so they rebranded it Paramount Plus. Like, come on.
Pass. Hard pass.
He's desperate. Speaking of desperate, let's move on to the new Paranormal Activity film. Will be a Paramount Plus exclusive. Let's everybody get excited. The new Paranormal Activity film from Paramount, Blumhouse, and Oren Peli will be released on the newly branded streaming platform. Christopher Landon, who did Freaky and Happy Death Day, and also did Paranormal Activity 2, 3, 4, and the marked ones, is writing it. And William Eubank, the director of Underwater, is directing it. The current release date is March 4th, 2022.
Let's just hope it's good. I mean, I like the creative team behind it. I just don't really see a need for another Paranormal Activity film. However, me bitching about it is not going to stop it from being made. Let's just hope it's good. I mean, I like the creative talent behind it. I enjoyed Freaky. I thought that was a pretty good movie. I really like the director. I think he did a good job relatively with the other Paranormal Activity film. I mean, the writer.
Yeah, and the director, I mean, Underwater is well directed. It's just very derivative. So let's hope he takes this script from Christopher Landon and does something good with it.
Wait, Underwater, is that the one that we reviewed?
Yes, Kristen
Oh
Stewart.
my God, I already forgot about that movie. Yeah, the Kristen Stewart one. God, that movie was just no. I don't know. I mean, I love Oren Peli, and I like this. I mean, I don't know. I don't really know how to feel about this. It's just like, I hear another IP franchise. I'm like, sure, okay. Like, I don't know what you want me to say to this anymore. Like, it's...
because
I have a hard time mustering up excitement for shit like this now.
I mean, when they came out with the marked ones, I was so excited because it was so fresh and it kind of revitalized the franchise for me, and it ended up being my favorite entry. And a bunch of people hated it.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I wasn't crazy about it, but I wouldn't say I hated it either.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say I hated it.
What's our final news story, James? Is there anything else we're going to be able
Oh yeah,
about?
here's something that I'm actually looking forward to, so we can end on a more positive note. You don't have to hear me bitching anymore. Spike Lee is going to be tackling Lovecraft, H.P. Lovecraft, with The Realm of Cthulhu for Netflix. Okay, so this is what I find fascinating. A couple of weeks ago on the podcast, we reviewed Spike Lee's movie, The Sweet Blood of Jesus, along with Ganja and Hess, which it is a remake of. And both of us said we want to see Spike Lee do more horror because it seems interesting, and we want to see him do something original with horror, not a remake, because he has such a unique voice. And for all of The Sweet Blood of Jesus is the issues that I had with it, overall, I thought it was a pretty fascinating film. And I think that Spike Lee has a lot of potential with horror. I know some people be like, what? But I really could see it here. Now, this is what makes it doubly interesting. Lovecraft Country, the show from HBO, was kind of a show that celebrated the legacy of H.P. Lovecraft's imagination, his mind, and all of like the wonderful pieces of fiction that he brought out into the world. All the Cthulhu, of course, which is iconic, but it also was able to acknowledge that H.P. Lovecraft's Lovecraft was a rotten, bigoted, racist, nasty-minded person who said really shitty and hateful things about people who were not white people. And he's racist even by the standards of that time. The stuff that he had to say about black people would have been considered appalling in an era of appalling racism. So I felt like the Lovecraft Country was kind of a way to kind of reclaim that legacy and fucking take it away from him and strip it of the racism. Now, Spike Lee, who is a very politically charged filmmaker, and racial injustice and racial issues are very much at the center of his filmography and the work that he does. I wonder what take he's going to have on this, because I don't feel like Spike Lee would take on a project on this unless he has a very unique, specific take on it, given that he's going to be adapting somebody who was a known racist. So I'm wondering what he's going to do with it, if he's going to flip the mythology the way that Lovecraft Country did, if he's going to flip it on its head, what he's going to reap out of it. I don't know, but I actually see a lot of fascinating potential for this project. It's hard to know where it's going to go.
Yeah, because not only have I been a huge fan of Lovecraft, his stories for years, not the man himself, just his stories, but I've been a huge fan for years, so I'm always excited anytime an H.P. Lovecraft story comes out. But the fact that Cthulhu's involved, I'm a huge Cthulhu nerd. I just want to see that creature, any incarnation I can, and I just get excited every time I hear his name, so I just can't wait to see what incarnation of Cthulhu that Spike Lee has for us. Do you think he's actually going to have Cthulhu, the monster?
I don't know. I mean, I think so. I don't know if it's going to be all up in your face constantly, because I imagine a character like Cthulhu would be more effective if you save him for the right moments. Like most villains, if you overexpose your villain, you're going to kind of takes away the fear of it. So I imagine we're going to see him, but not too much. Same way that like Anthony Hopkins, Hannibal Lecter, he only has 16 minutes of screen time in The Silence of the Lambs, but it's enough, and I think any more would overexpose that character and take away some of the mystery. So I imagine that we'll see him, but not too much. I'm just really interested on what Spike Lee's take on all of this is going to be, because it's going to be something politically charged or unique. And I know it's not going to sit well with a lot of horror fans who don't like messages in their movies or don't like subtext. Boo fucking who, cry me a river. Yeah, I'm excited for this. I'm excited for this project, whatever it turns out to be.
Yeah, and even though I wasn't blown away by The Sweet Blood of Jesus, I seen the potential for a great horror filmmaker there in Spike Lee.
So we'll see how it goes.
Let's see him tackle Lovecraft, see what happens.
All right, so now we are going to get into our films of the day, and we are going to go chronologically. We have 2 films to discuss, but we're going to discuss the one that was released first. Am I correct, Michael?
Yeah, both movies were made in 2019, but they were both delayed. St. Maud more than Synchronic. And Synchronic was directed by Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, who did the movies Spring, Resolution, and The Endless, which I've raved about on the podcast. And it was written by Justin Benson. Like I said, it was a 2019 film, had a festival run, a limited release in other countries, then finally released in the US in October of 2020. It stars Anthony Mackie from Hurt Locker and The Avengers, and Jamie Dornan from 50 Shades of Grey. They play New Orleans paramedics and best friends Steve and Dennis, who are called to a series of gruesome accidents involving a new drug called Synchronic. When Dennis's daughter goes missing after taking the drug, Steve realizes that it transports people back in time.
So, just to preface this, Michael Pickle is a huge fan of this filmmaking team. So be aware of that. Let's hear what you have to. Let's hear your thoughts, and then I'll give you some of my thoughts.
Well, first of all, I have to preface what I have to say with my expectations for this movie were through the roof. Not only am I a huge fan of these directors, I think they improve themselves with each film, and I think they go farther and farther with the scope of their stories, and it always seems to have an air of realism that keeps the story grounded and keeps blowing my mind again and again. You know what I mean? Because they go so far out, but they always stay grounded in real human emotion and real characters that I cared about, to bring it back down to earth. So that's why with this one, I have to say I had to watch it twice. It's the first time I think I've ever not enjoyed a movie at all and then watched it again just because I loved the director so much, and I had to see why there was this disconnect with me. So the good for me on this was the camera work. It was handheld like all their work is, but it's really good handheld camera work. It's a good score, even though it was oddly placed at times, but it was still a good score. Great performance by Anthony Mackie, but only a decent performance, I thought, from Jamie Dornan. And it was a good story, but I felt it was mishandled. So here was the bad for me. The bad was the good score was made distracting because of the placement of it. I thought it was bad placement on quite a few parts where it was blaring score when nothing significant was going on, and then when something significant was going on where you feel like there would be a score accompaniment would help the effectiveness of it, where there was silence. And I usually like silence in a score, you know, carefully placed silence to build the tension, but it was distracting here for me. It abandons character development for the experiment, which over-explains the complicated story. Overall, it felt staged to me. The real world didn't feel real, so therefore the surreal part of it just seemed like another version of this fake world. The story editing I thought was off. It only goes to Dennis for the flashbacks for a long period of time when Steve is doing his experiment. And there's one scene in particular that really was just laughable to me. Is they kept invested in Steve's experiment to explain this story, what's going on, why these people were going back in time, where that, you know, depending on where they took the drug, that's where they went to a different place in time. So it seems like the one I had particular problem with is they kept showing Dennis in flashbacks. So they completely abandoned him as a character and kind of just kept showing flashbacks during this experiment. And one of the flashbacks, it's actually just a flashback of him telling his wife the story about Steve and why Steve's so great. I thought that was just plain laughable. And then I got the aching impression throughout watching this. The storytellers seemed to think that the story and the effects were more impressive than I thought they were. And it was the same thing with Tenet with me. They seemed intended to be very focused on this outrageous story and these crazy effects.
The Chris Nolan film.
Christopher Nolan film. But when it comes right down to it, none of it was very impressive. It was just superimposing an outdoor location onto an indoor location, stuff like that. But I'm following these characters' lives, and then it seems almost too brief that I'm following their lives before Steve starts his experiment. And then we don't see Dennis for far too long, and when we do, it's in flashbacks. And then they're finally reunited, and then you see the bond that I thought was missing for way too long. You see the bond between these two friends at the beginning. It's abandoned for a long period of time. And then when they're reunited, Dennis does nothing but cry about his wife because their missing daughter has come between them. He doesn't seem that concerned with finding his daughter. He's just crying about him and his wife not getting along. So it seems focused on the relationship that was not developed instead of looking for the daughter. And then after all this melodramatic bullshit, Steve reveals that he has this tape where he experimented and he knows where his daughter might have went. So it just comes along way late in the conversation. It seems like we just went through all that for nothing. And this is followed by a philosophical conversation that feels forced, and especially didn't seem like it was coming out of Steve. I mean, not Steve. It sounded right coming out of Steve. It did not sound right coming out of Dennis. The philosophical conversation fell flat. Through a lot of this, the score made what was going on almost seem trivial. It was so poorly placed. It made what was going on the screen trivial. And then another mind-numbingly dumb part, I thought, was the chemist showing up to explain everything. Yes, I see why the chemist showed up. He was trying to buy up all the drug. But just the fact that the chemist shows up to over-explain everything was just really ham-handed for me.
Nolan
and then, yeah. And then this was one of many scenes of over-explaining. And then right up to the end, it was a overly sappy, melodramatic ending. And then the ghost handshake, hell no, dude. The ghost handshake, no. That just hardened. So there was a lot I liked about this, but there was just too much to just take me out of it. And I was just so disappointed. I had to actually temper my response to it because I was going to completely trash it, but I can't completely trash it because these guys are good writers, good filmmakers, and their filmmaking skills are still evident in this story. But it was just misguided for me. It just went in too many directions that fell flat, and the character development wasn't there for me. So that's what I thought.
Okay. You make a compelling argument. I give you that. Your points are well-founded, and I actually didn't really think about certain things until you pointed them out right now, and I could see your point. However, I think for this the flaws that this movie has, I thought it was a very enveloping experience. Now, before I get to the what I like about it, I will say what in hindsight now, I didn't really think about this before until you mentioned it. I guess there is a problem with the movie in the sense that it revolves around this conflict with his daughter missing. And that element actually, when I watched it, seemed to come pretty abruptly. Like, there's nothing that led to her, like, actually, when did she go missing? It's just the character says she's missing. We're not really sure how she went missing or where she went missing. I mean, we find out after, but it just seemed kind of strangely placed. And you're right. The problem with Dennis's character, played by Jamie Dornan, is that he doesn't even seem that interested in finding his daughter, which I actually didn't think about until you mention it now. But now that I'm thinking back on the film, most of the conversations when he's talking are about how his marriage is falling apart and how his daughter missing is ruining his marriage. And now that I think about it, that you mentioned, I was like, oh yeah, that is true. I guess he wasn't even seeing that concern. He more was concerned. You would think he would be more concerned about his daughter going missing. On the other hand, I think Anthony Mackie really sells this movie. I think this is my favorite performance that I've seen from him so far, and I think that this movie asks a lot of him to carry so much of it on its shoulders that he had me going along for most of the journey. I do think that they could have developed a friendship like you said, more. But I think the point is that they're going through a certain rough patch where you get a sense of their relationship at the beginning of the film. You could tell that they have a very, like, brotherly bond, the way that they are, that you don't see back until the end of the film. But I think because most of the film, they're in a funk in their lives. Steve learns that he has some form of terminal cancer in the film, and he's dealing with that. He's kind of more withdrawn. He's delving into pills, and he's not really talking much to Steve. We do see the tension between their relationship, though, and where it starts to fray, and how Steve tries to hide things from Dennis, like his pill addiction, what he's going through, and everything. So I think that the part of it was that you get to see their bond, and for most of it, you see how it deteriorates or how they're separated, and at the end, it kind of reminds you that these guys are good friends despite their differences or what they've been through. And I really like Steve's character a lot. I thought he was a very noble, likable character. And I'll give you this. He seemed a lot more concerned about Dennis's daughter than Steve seemed more concerned about it than Dennis did. And I think that might be an issue of narrative. Like, it should not be. Anthony Mackie spends the entire time complicatedly trying to devise ways to rescue his best friend's daughter, and the actual father spends most of the time sulking and whining about his marriage, and it makes him seem a little weak, to be honest. So I do get that that's clunky. However, I also liked the cinematography of this movie. I liked the look of it. I was drawn in right away at the beginning. That entire opening surreal sequence I thought was really cool. And I liked a lot of the camera work in this movie, the way that it follows characters, the way that it's handheld. I feel like it builds tension. I think there is some interesting character stuff in here. When I already explained this to you, one of the things that I find interesting about this movie, and this doesn't happen too often where the main characters are a black person and a white person, usually movies like this try to play the colorblind angle where the black best friend and the white best friend don't have, how do I put it? They're treated the same in society. They have the same types of issues, and one isn't more stressed out than the other. This is by no means a message film, and it's not about racism at all. But I found it interesting that it's acknowledged in a way that's very subtle, without ever drawing attention to it or even making it close to being one of the focal points of the movie. The movie just seems to be aware of race and how people are treated in society and expectations that a white person might have going into the world versus a black person, the type of prejudice that they might experience, different things like that. And I like the way that this is subtly acknowledged. I don't think you see that in too many films where the best, and it's common where it's the best friends are one black person and one white person. You never get the sense that the world that they live in might give more advantage to the other person than the other person, and they seem to be aware of it at the same time. And I kind of appreciated that awareness that doesn't rub itself in your face. So I thought that was a very interesting aspect of the movie. I liked the sequences where Steve actually goes back in time. I think there's some good tension there. I think it's imaginative. I personally don't get the impression that you got, that they're just trying to show off or that they're more impressed with the story. I thought it was done in a way that was relatively level-headed and subtle. I don't think it's anywhere near as bombastic as what Tenet was going for. So I was able to buy most of it, and I did like the last moment that you didn't like, and I already know. Audiences are going to either really get pissed off at that ending or it's really going to connect with them. And for all the flaws that Dennis's character has, played by Jamie Dornan, I did believe that there was a bond there, and I did like the last moment when they were shaking hands. And I'm surprised you didn't. I'm surprised you didn't, Michael, because you usually appreciate those types of emotive endings like that.
Yeah, because there was so many moments before that fell flat. I think that's what made that one feel flat for me.
Okay,
because
I could see that.
The relationship wasn't developed enough for me, and there were moments of genuine connection between those characters. I mean, I'm not going to deny that. There were moments of genuine connection, moments of fascinating character developments, but just overall, it was just too many times where I was distracted. And I admit, if I hadn't seen these filmmakers' other films, if this would have been a completely fresh, the first time I'd seen anything from these filmmakers, I would have been a little more impressed with it. But I just know that these guys can take a crazy story with a huge scope and humanize it and ground it and keep it grounded through the whole thing. And it's through ambiguity and mystery. And there wasn't enough ambiguity and mystery in this. Once the experiment started, I would have rather Anthony Mackie do the experiment without telling me about it and looking at the camera and telling me about it the whole time. If he would have just done the experiment, I would have gotten a lot of the stuff that he said without him saying it to me.
But it's also a narrative device because he's recording it in case, because he knows that he may die or he may not make it back. So I think that's kind of important, though, to have it recorded. And I understand. However, I will give you this. It is quite possible that using that narrative device could be an excuse to make exposition seem more organic than it is, which is very possible. I'd have to watch it again to tell you if that's what I got out of it. But the way I saw it is that since he's recording and he doesn't even know if he's going to make it out of these experiments, and even if he does, he knows that he doesn't really have long to live. So I think it kind of makes sense that he's doing this whole video diary thing where he's explaining everything to the audience.
But even with all my complaints, I would still recommend pretty much anybody to watch it and form their own opinion. Because my complaints about it, pretty much all my complaints have to do with a disconnect on my part. So I fully realize that if someone with my same sensibilities would have connected with that, then it would have blown him away. It would have blown me away if I would have connected with it. But I didn't, so I had to go back and watch it. I actually didn't know all of what the disconnect was the first time I watched it. It was just, there was a few things I had a problem with, but there was something I couldn't quite put my finger on, so I did have to watch it again to figure out where the disconnect was. So it's not a terrible movie by any means. It just didn't connect with me, therefore a lot of the most important aspects of it fell flat.
Well, I mean, in order for those moments to be effective, like the one that I think worked for me, the ending, there has to be a good foundation in order for it to be effective. And that in and of itself is a subjective experience depending on how you're watching. So I could see if you're not connecting with any of it, it's going to make the touching moment at the end seem kind of lame because it's built on something that you never felt believable to begin with, that you never were convinced of, or you never felt was believable to begin with. So I could see that, but since it worked for me, and here's another thing, I think you had a lot of expectations for it and I had no expectations for it, and that might have colored our perception. That when I just turned it on, I loved The Endless. I even I like Spring quite a bit. I liked him, but I don't know. I wasn't like expecting a certain type of thing, or I didn't expect to be blown away. I like these filmmakers. I'm just gonna watch this and see what comes out. I didn't really expect it to be anything, and I was pleasantly surprised by what I got. Mind you, your complaints are valid, and I don't think it's a perfect movie. I do think it was very effective, and I think most of it because Anthony Mackie, to me, sold the shit out of it. I think that's the best performance he's had. He's been around for a while. He's been in the Avengers movies. He's played Tupac. Of course, there's a reference to that in there, like a little subtle jab at that. But I think this is the most he's ever had a chance to shine on camera, or in terms of emotions that he got to explore and everything. I mean, Hurt Locker is a good movie, but that's kind of Jeremy Renner's film when you think in terms of whose psyche and whose emotions are exploring. So I appreciated that he got a chance to kind of shine in a role like this.
Yeah. And he was definitely more believable with the philosophical stuff than the other character was.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
He seemed at home with that type of dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, for these filmmakers, I would, if people in the audience want to get into Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, my recommendation is The Endless. I think that's a good place to start. I think that's a better film than this one is. It has more of the mystery and ambiguity that you feel is kind of lacking in this. I also think it's more creative and more mind-bending and a more rounded film. But I thought this was a good attempt at a bigger budget version of what they normally do. I also think that they were trying to appeal to a wider audience's film because it's not as there's not as much head trippiness or mind fuckery going on with this movie as there is in some of their other films, I would say. So I think this is a kind of an attempt to take what they do and make it a little bit more accessible to a wider audience. Because I mean, I really like these filmmakers, but like they seem to be, their popularity seems to be limited to like, I noticed that their fans seem to be people either involved in the film industry or hardcore cinephiles or hardcore horror heads. They don't get much talk in the mainstream. Yeah. I think this is their bid to try to push their name out beyond the established fan base. And they have a very dedicated fan base within the horror community, but it's a limited one. And I think they're trying to expand it with this movie.
I think this one was more visual than cerebral. And then their other ones were more cerebral than visual. And I think that's what I liked about them. And if you watch The Endless, which I think is their best work, I recommend watching Resolution first because there's direct ties between Resolution and The Endless that are just fascinating.
You're right. There's character crossover and his unawareness that they take place in the same universe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So split opinions on this one between the two of us, and I'm surprised. I really thought you were going to like this even more than I did.
I thought I was too, and I even told you I found myself in the second watch actively trying to enjoy it more because I love those directors so much. But then I ended up seeing what I didn't like about it and where the disconnect was.
Mm-hmm. So now on to Saint Maud, the latest horror film from A24.
Now, this one was another highly anticipated one for me. I had my expectations through the roof for this one, couldn't wait for it. And it met and exceeded all my expectations. This is another 2019 film. It's Saint Maud. It had a festival run in 2019, limited release in other countries in 2020, and then finally came to the US in February of this year. It's written and directed by Rose Glass, and surprisingly her first feature film. I thought this was a seasoned professional here, but it's her first feature film. It's about a strange and reclusive young nurse who becomes obsessed with saving the soul of her aging patient. Right from the beginning, it hooked me in and it never let me go. You see a girl that you don't know with blood on her hands, and she looks up at the ceiling and there's a giant bug crawling on the ceiling, and then the title comes up. Hooked in right away and never let me go. You slowly start to see an early onset of this extreme religious paranoia, but it's an early onset, but you can also see it's been there for a while building. You get a very strong sense of that. Excellent cinematography, even better than the last film. And the score and the cinematography both go together for optimal effect. And then it's already effective right from that first scene. And the score and the cinematography just get more and more effective as the movie goes along. Every scene seems to be more effective than the last scene. There's this perfect awkward bonding between the nurse and patient. It's just perfectly orchestrated. Maud's existing psychosis becomes more intense as we see how she's been dealing with it, and her intense need to save people that's almost orgasmic. And you kind of see her background come in through her actions and through the things that she does to save people. And then I love how the patient, Amanda, is more susceptible to Maud's religious influence when she's sick. And then as she gets better, she almost mocks it. And I think that adds to Maud's psychosis, that someone is seeing eye to eye to her and not mocking her because of her religious beliefs. Someone is actually buying into what she's saying, and then it turns into a mocking session and makes her look like a fool in front of everybody. But I love a lot of the little things too. A lot of it's little things that were like cool and eye-catching, but they were also unnerving in a way. Like when Maude was distraught after that big party, and her patient humiliated her at that party, and then you see her distraught and in pain, and then in the background you see someone playing a violin. Mm-hmm. And then when they switch perspective, the violin player's gone. And then stuff like she's picking up glasses at the party, and you see a tornado come up in the glass and it breaks, and you wonder, was that in her head? Did she break the glass? Is there some kind of religious thing connected to this? And then when she thinks she hears the voice of God, and by the way, the voice of God was actually the actress that played Saint Maud, which is with a pitch shifter. And then the camera shots, when the camera goes completely upside down on some shots, and then some shots it's almost like vertical, and everything is done orchestrated the perfect effect to go along with the drama in that scene. And then it all culminates in this holy shit ending that so satisfying. I can't imagine it being any better and any more effective. It makes you question whether it's real or not. She kind of manipulates her surroundings, manipulates the people around her, and you wonder if that's real. And then the quick flash right at the end, I'm not going to explain what it is, but the quick flash right at the end could not be more effective than it was. And it left me with this feeling of a bit of shock, emotion, sadness, a lot of feelings all at once in one swift moment. and then it just a movie that leaves you feeling like that. It just makes you look back on the rest of it even more fondly. And then just explaining what I liked about it makes me love the movie even more.
Okay, so the ending of it actually had me cackling in laughter. It might sound weird, but I was actually busting up at the ending. And this is not to undercut it. I actually think it's a fantastic ending that sums up the entire movie and what it's building towards. I also think it'll piss some people off. Here's another thing. This is my interpretation of it. This is how I read Saint Maud. It is very much in the mode of an elevated art house horror film, stuff that you think of when people talk about Hereditary or The Witch, or, you know, stuff that's released by A24. I also think that this is a very anti-organized religion film. I think I've ever seen a horror movie go this viciously hard on organized religion. I've seen it teased at or even mocked a little bit, and even like in Ganja and Hess we talked about how some of it's undercutting some religious ideas. I think the stance of this movie is that Maude herself has let her religious fervor and her paranoia blind her from reality. It's allowed her to turn herself into a bigoted person. It's allowed her to become a very sexually repressed person who is unable to express themselves in healthy emotional ways. I also noticed that the first time she's having her orgasm because God is entering her, she seems to be thinking of her patient who she was just stretching in very sensual ways. And there's something very sexual, psychosexual about all of her moments when she's touched by God or when she kind of feels it. And I think at the end, and this is my interpretation of it because I've never seen a horror movie do this, usually with something that's psychological, supernatural, say something like Hereditary or The Witch. Those movies have a sort of ambiguity towards them in a way that like kind of paints you as like, is this real or is it not? Or even The Shining does it. And then I would say even The Witch and Hereditary go out of their way by the end of it to let you know that even though most of this is ambiguous and it's left to be questioning it, everything that you saw supernatural was actually real and it actually happened. I actually view this as an anti-Hereditary or anti-The Witch, where it's like, no, she's crazy, she's repressed, she's lost her fucking mind, and it's turned her into an unbearable person who has no joy in her life. And all of this was in her head. I don't think any of it actually happened. I don't know if I've seen a horror movie that takes that stance. It's either it did happen, or maybe it did, maybe it didn't happen. My interpretation is that most of the shit was in her head and she's actually psychotic and that she needs help. I even think that last speech when she starts undercutting her religion, this is like a speech where she's trying to pray with the patient. She's like, no, stop with that nonsense. You realize this is not all real. She calls her the saddest girl that she's ever seen. I really think that this is a very anti-religious horror movie that attacks people who allow it to so overtake their lives that they don't know how to experience any form of joy, and they become judgmental and hateful towards other people. I mean, look at the sex scenes that she has, and she's jerking that guy off. So joyless and so creepy. Or when she's having sex with that other guy, and then he keeps like, you know, in an affectionate way, putting her hand on her, and she keeps pushing it, and she's fantasizing about weird shit. And that's what I like. They don't really say Maude has a past that, you know, she's trying to like repent for. And you get glimpses of it at the beginning, but we don't know the extent because some of this is so much in her head. I'm like, you know how at the beginning of the movie you see like something really creepy and it looks like she massacred somebody? Yeah. She should be in jail if it's really that bad. She would not be walking around freely, still being able to get jobs still being able to get job nursing somebody back to health or through an agency. So for one, we don't know how real any of that actually is. We know that she did do something. We don't know the extent to what she did, or if it was a mess up or it was an accident. It's only alluded to. It's never really spelled out. And it seems like the entire time she is just trying to repent for this sin that we get a strong idea of what it is, but we never are actually clear what it is. And she had such a repressed performance. The way that she carries herself, she seems so zapped of any kind of warmness or empathy. And I think that she has a kind of empathy that's a warped sense of empathy. She thinks that she's being a good person when she's helping, but what she's actually doing is really harmful and just not good. thought this was a very fascinating A24 horror movie. Granted, I don't like it as much as Hereditary or The Witch. I think those movies are more full experiences in this one. Also, I do in horror, just because it is the horror genre, I prefer ambiguity, and I would rather have the supernatural be real in a horror movie. I don't interpret it as that way in this one, and I prefer not to have horror movies pull that. That's not a trick that I care for. However, I think for this specific movie, it needed to kind of suggest that. And I wish I could talk more at the ending, but it was such a spoiler. I cannot ruin the ending for people because it had me laughing. But it's just, I can't explain it. I want to talk about it. I really think that was such a fantastic ending. And I saw it twice. Yeah. So, I have a very strong opinion. I really liked it. I also like this is like 80 minutes long.
Yeah.
It's so compact, and it gets to its point. There's no like filler or time wasting it. People are calling it a slow burn, but I'm like, dude, look how much happens in such a short amount of time. Where do we get from here to this point by the end? I'm like, that's not a slow burn.
And I love how she behaves in such a blasphemous way. It's just outright blasphemy, where it's so blasphemous, it's almost on purpose, but you can tell she's completely oblivious of how blasphemous it is. She's so wrapped up in her bastardized connection to the Lord that she thinks this is all part of it. She thinks these sexual feelings are all part of it.
And I think that it's implied a little bit that she's either like bisexual or lesbian. And I think that part of the point the movie is making is that her religion, that she's so religious and so bent on these very antiquated views of sexuality that she confuses her own sexual lust and excitement for religious fervor, and she kind of denies it and pushes it down to parts of her brain in a way that's harmful. Like the way that she kicks out that one girl for, fornicating with her patient. She has such a self-righteous air, and it seems like this is one of those people, and we all know people like that, and I'm not trying to knock or anything or be controversial, but there are some people who are absolutely obnoxious with their religious beliefs, and it allows them to become irritating, mentally makes them become irritating. It makes them sound insane. It makes them intolerant, and it makes them become self-oppressive. And I think this movie is a very brutal attack on a certain type of religious person, and I think it uses the horror genre to really pinpoint what's wrong with people who think like this, and what's wrong with this sort of mentality, and how damaging it is. And I think it almost has an acidic attitude, where I can see this really pissing people off, where if you're a very religious person, you might be a little offended by this movie.
Yeah,
I'd be very careful. Tread lightly. If these beliefs mean a lot to you, this is not the movie for you.
Yeah,
this is because all this is going to do is completely trash it. But I think I appreciate it because I don't know of any horror film that does what this one does. I feel like there's things that are similar to it. It definitely belongs in a certain type of niche of horror, but its little twist of what it's trying to say gives it a slightly different tinge. And I think it's a bold choice. I don't know of any horror film that goes this hard on something. And I don't even know if you could call it subtext. A lot of horror movies put subtext like this. I feel like it's just text. It's just so blatant that they're trying to portray her in a certain way.
And I love that the movie doesn't try to convince you that what she's experiencing is real, but it does just enough flashes just to put the little bit of doubt in your head, just maybe it's going to turn out to be real in the end. Yeah. But then ultimately it's not, but it puts just enough in there where it's not trying to convince you it's real, but it's just put little hints that it might be.
It's directed in the Rose Glass. She directed those horror scenes as if they were happening.
Yeah.
And I'll admit there's a couple of parts where I thought, well, maybe she is right. Like her floating above the air. Some of the things that she does, the violent acts that she commits, the hallucinations that she sees. It's obviously a very, very disturbed young woman.
And there's only one thing that's not even a negative thing. It's just the only thing I would say that's not 100% original and effective. was just the fact that of how much some of the scenes were reminiscent of The Witch and Hereditary in the way of someone innocent being overtaken by evil. But that's really the only thing that could be.
Though. But it inverts with those things because those characters are being overtaken by external forces that they can't control, and you end up feeling some kind of sympathy from them. Her, it's like the inversion of what's going on. It's coming from her, projecting it outwards. She's the cause of her misery, whereas in those other films, it's external forces and it's a sort of fate that they can't control. This movie, I think, oh no, this is her damn fault for it escalating to this point.
Yeah, and it was just moments that are reminiscent. It's not derivative at all, I don't think, but just moments were reminiscent of that. But it definitely did its own thing.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I really dug this movie. I think if you can sympathize with the point of view of the director, I think there's some funny stuff in here too. I think there's genuine humor in this movie. However, it's the type of humor that depending on what you personally believe, you're either going to be offended or irritated or annoyed by it, or you're going to be amused by it, or it's going to make you smile, or it's going to make you laugh. I feel like this one is going to test people depending on what they believe about religion, what they believe about a lot of things. And I could see some people getting a little bit bothered by the way that it sticks its knife into a certain type of belief system.
Am I crazy to feel that it comes off as more accessible than The Witch and Hereditary, especially? I mean, it
maybe
does have
in a sense because it's shorter. People have less of an excuse to call it a slow burn. But The Witch is only like 10 minutes longer than this, though. So I mean, that's even a hard one to say.
Yeah, because it does have some polarizing aspects to it. But as far as the filmmaking goes, it goes by pretty fast and it tells the story pretty well. And I didn't find myself being perplexed at any time. I was fully aware and in her world the entire time. So it seems almost a little more accessible, even though it might piss some people off.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, the horror audience is so hard to predict that I've seen some reactions to this, but it's not spreading like I thought it was, and I haven't heard anything overly negative about Saint Maud yet. I'm sure I will eventually, but I'm surprised there hasn't been a backlash setting in, because I feel like it has a lot of the divisive elements that art house horror has, and then it throws in another layer on it that can make it doubly divisive to other people. So I want to see more reactions to this because I haven't seen too much about this movie. I've seen people post it that they watched it. A couple people liked it, or is it me? Have you not seen the backlash set in yet?
Yeah, I haven't seen much at all. No,
I haven't either.
I've actually seen more people like it than dislike it.
I think the length of the movie probably benefits it too because it's so short. I don't think it really has time to be considered a slow burn.
Yeah. And there's really no lingering scenes. Every scene is important. Every scene is effective, I think. Every scene drives the story forward. So it doesn't meander at all. I thought it was fairly fast moving.
Yeah, pretty fast moving film. So we actually we were talking about it last year when we did a special, the most anticipated films of 2020. Most of them didn't happen. Could never anticipated the virus that we ended up encountering, but yeah, this should have been came out over a year ago. Not over a year, about a year ago. This was supposed to come out.
Yeah,
I'm glad we're finally getting to see it now. I can't believe it's already been a year. It went by so fast. But I'm counting this as a 2021 horror movie because it didn't get released over here until 2021, until this year. So if this is the kickoff to some good 2021 horror, because I'm still catching up on 2020, then maybe this year is going to be really awesome then.
I'm just so excited that I had my hopes up for this one, and it exceeded my expectations. I always love when a movie does that.
Same here. Really does.
I wanted Synchronic to do that so bad.
Well, there's always next time. If you didn't like this one, maybe the next Benson and Moorhead production will be one that's a little bit more to your liking.
Oh, they didn't lose me, believe me.
Oh, okay.
They still got me hooked. I'll still check out anything they do.
Definitely. So those are reviews of the latest two movies. Well, not the latest two movies, the movies you wanted to discuss, both brand new. Now it's time to play another round of Horror Tubi Roulette, which we haven't played in months. So who wants to go first?
I miss it. This is a fun game. We haven't played in a few months. It's where we go through Tubi, which has a huge horror selection of thousands of movies. It used to have a lot more filler. There's actually a lot of good selections there now. So each of us,
for the audience, Tubi's a free app, and which is why we do this. Anybody can download it.
Each of us. Fell down.
You okay there, Michael?
Yeah.
Okay.
On my head.
That's all right.
On my head. Oh, jacked up.
Yeah, so we just scroll through the section, not looking at what we're looking at in the horror section. And when we decide to stop, wherever it lands, we have to watch that movie and report on it. So you want to go first, Michael?
All right. I am in the horror section, and it looks pretty impressive. So I'm hoping to get a good one. And I close my eyes and keep scrolling. And I'll stop about right here and blindly click on Mother's Day with Rebecca De Mornay.
Mother's Day?
Mine is Mother's Day from 2012, starring Rebecca De Mornay. When her sons break into a home and take the owners and their guests hostage, a mother teaches them all what real torture is all about. That sounds interesting.
Sounds exciting.
I have not seen that one.
All right, well, let me know what you think. And who directed that film?
I just noticed it's directed by Darren Lynn Bousman, so I just became even more excited. I can't believe I haven't seen this.
Okay, so I'm going to go right now. I'm going to close my eyes, and I'm scrolling. 3, 2, 1. What is this? Let Me In. No, we're going to do a redo. I've seen that movie already. It's a remake, an inferior remake of Let the Right One In. It's not a bad movie, but I've seen this already, so I'm going to go again. Okay, Michael?
Okay. Whack, whack, whack.
Goodies. I've seen this one too. Let me go one more time because the point of this is to discover new movies, and I don't like what's going on. I don't know how this is happening. Let's do this again. I've seen Cooties.
It's a better selection they have.
And next up we have Snoop Dogg's Hood of Horror.
No way!
This is Snoop Dogg is your host for this collection of 3 fables that capture the hellish fate awaiting some scandalous residents of the Hood of Horror. Who is the director of this? Why is my thing going slow? Directed by Stacy Tidal. Also stars Billy D. Williams, the great Billy D. Williams of Star Wars and Batman fame, and Lady Sings the Blues. That's the other one.
Yeah.
The Billie Holiday movie.
I might have to watch that one along with you. I've been wanting to see Snoop Dogg's Hood of Horror after I've seen Bones.
I like Bones, so we'll see what this is all about. But yeah, like I said, Cooties I had already seen, and I've already seen Let Me In, and I'm not a fan of it, and I didn't want to rewatch it, so I had to go into something new. Sorry if that felt like a little bit of a cheat, but I don't like landing on stuff I've already seen when the point is to discover something you haven't.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so in a couple of weeks, we'll report back to you with our thoughts on each of our films. Stay tuned to us. Keep following us on social media. We have facebook.com/Pickles Horror Show. On Facebook, you could keep up with us, all our updates and what we're up to. You can also check us out on Instagram.com @Pickles Horror Show. We have a lot of same type of updates that you get there. Right now, we're available on YouTube. If you're watching it that way, we're available on Spotify. We're available on Apple Podcasts, and we are available on SoundCloud. You can check us out on any one of those platforms. Check in the description. We have in our description we have a link to the Flow page, which will give you access to all of our social media and every platform that we're on.
And check back often because we have a feature film that's going to be released pretty soon. We're looking for distributors right now. So that's going to be released pretty soon. And we're developing 2 feature films right now. And there still might be a place for horror shows. So stay tuned. We got a lot of cool shit coming up.
All right. Till next week, folks. Happy horror.
Happy horror.